Now that the Space Marine Codex is out and Oath of Moment is no longer as helpful in anti-tank problems as it was before, let's discuss which units can help us deal with big and scary stuff that we have now in Codex Space Marines. In the 5th place we have the usual suspect, the Redemptor Dreadnought. It's a very durable toughness 10, 12 wound, 2+ save and -1 damage platform, which makes him one of the most survivable units in the Space Marine Codex. That -1 damage will come in handy a lot, especially considering that this is the unity that you want to move as much forward as possible to actually use his combat, which he can fight rather well. With 5 attacks at strength 12, AP 2, damage 3, he can do a lot of damage to elite infantry and monsters and vehicles. Previously, with Oath of Moment rerolling all wounds against the target, he would have been our prime #1 choice, because you would get so much for his package in terms of shooting and melee. Now the situation is quite different, because his main gun, which is the plasma cannon, is only strength 9, so it will be wounding most monsters and vehicles on 5s. His other very good gun, which used to do 1 or 2 mortal wounds to the vehicle target every time you shot at it, was the strength 5 dev wound onslaught cannon. Now it's again not as useful, because you cannot fish for those 6s to wound. But still, that's a very good plasma cannon. It's a lot of shots, d6+1 with blast. Obviously, it's the best gun in the world against something like a Terminator blob, but we're not talking about anti-tank here. So AP4, damage 3. So anything that will actually get through the wound stage will be very dangerous for the target. 36-inch range is also nice, considering his 8-inch move. You're essentially getting an effective 44-inch threat range, which is a lot. So that's why I believe he should be in top 5, as unlike other units, he can also fight well in combat and he has a lot of durability. Plus, don't forget that his shooting will be actually extremely useful against most other targets in the game, apart from high toughness tanks and monsters. So having a couple, or in my case, I would always recommend having 3 of these, especially with the 200 points that they cost now in the Miniature Field Manual version 1.4, is highly advisable. This is especially true if you bring the Lieutenant with a combi weapon for reroll 1s to wound, because you may find yourself often rolling 1 or 2 1s on the wound roll, and you will be able to reroll them, and the chance of you actually rolling that 5+ will be much increased. Obviously, you're then counting on the tank or monster actually being on the objective that you've selected for the Lieutenant's ability, and that may not happen, but again, plasma cannon should not be your only anti-tank gun in your army, and it will be very good with those real ones to wound against anything that is lower toughness. And if you're running Iron Storm Spearhead, like most of you will probably be if you're playing Space Marine, he is definitely a must-have unit, and his strength 9 on plasma will be offset by the 1 reroll to wound you're gonna have, extra mobility that you will get with enhancements from Tech Marines, and also the lethal hits, which are gonna actually be very helpful against the high toughness tanks. Because you're hitting on 2s thanks to the Tech Marine, you might as well just reroll all of your hits using Oath of Moment and fish for those 6s lethal hits, and only then continue to the wound roll, and there use your maybe reroll 1 to wound from Lieutenant and your 1 reroll to wound from the Iron Storm Spearhead detachment. In the 4th place we have the Inceptor squad, and it's maybe quite unusual to see them here because they are more of a support piece than the anti-tank, but if you look at them closely, you can actually see some quite nasty guns that they're carrying. Yes, they have the 3-inch deep strike rule, which you really want to use to do stuff like stealing objectives from your opponents or setting them up behind ruins in a place where opponent cannot get them, and then moving 10 inches out and shooting something that your opponent doesn't want you to shoot. This same ability can also be used to draw angles to tanks without, for example, them getting cover from your attacks, which can be very beneficial considering that they are already AP3 on the plasmas. And now that the Oath is no longer a problem solver for the mid-strength guns, as in case of the Redemptor, and the plasmas on the Inceptors, which are strength 8, the twin-linked ability that they get on their guns is very, very useful. For support purposes, I would always run the bolters, because you get 1 more shot there, and you get sustained hits 2 rule, which in combination with Oath can get you some crazy numbers of hits with full rerolls to wound. But if you're trying to kill tanks, nothing beats the Strength 8 AP3 damage 3 from the plasmas. Yes, they're hazardous, so you'll probably lose one, or maybe if you're very unlucky, 2 guys from your first volley, but you will do a lot of damage to a tank, namely about 12 wounds if you have Oath on that target, which is a lot for a unit that costs 220 points and can pop up essentially anywhere on the board. As if there was not enough, they also get Assault and Pistol on their guns, so if something tags them in combat, they can still shoot into combat, and they also can shoot after advancing if they somehow survive their drop turn, and after that you can move them and do an action, for example, with them, even if they advance. Don't forget, you can also deploy them on top of ruins, which will get you plunging fire for extra AP, which will be AP4 in case of plasmas, or AP3 if you decide not to overcharge, which can be good sometimes if you don't have a very heavy tank in front of you, if you have something softer or maybe something that is already wounded, and instead of risking guys, you can just decide to maybe decrease their output a bit, but keep them safe. So all in all, almost a must-have unit nowadays with Space Marines. I would probably always run at least one squad. I can see the argument of running 3 units of them, maybe 1 big 6-man blob of plasmas and 2 smaller units of bolters, stuff like that. I would definitely recommend buying some and painting some. By the way, if you're interested in me helping you fix your list or prepare you for tournaments, please check out the links in the description to my Patreon, and we'll convert you and your list into a mean, lean Warhammer playing machine. Thank you for your attention. Next, the big bad hooligans, the Eradicators. They are the typical anti-tank unit that you imagine when you think anti-tank and infantry. They also don't care about the changes to Oath because they were already rerolling wounds, hits and damage against monsters and vehicles, which are their prime targets. Obviously, the strength 9 on the Meltas is something I'm worried about, and that's why, even though statistically they should kill a toughness 12 2+ safe tank, it all hangs on the fact of you statistically rolling 5+ after the reroll, which sometimes just will not happen, and it will be very frustrating. So using them, even though they should kill tanks statistically, I would still have something in reserve to maybe finish off 1 or 2 wounds on that tank if need be. And the full squad of 6 essentially gets 8 reliable anti-tank shots, 4 from the Melta rifles and 4 from the multi-Meltas that you get in the squad, and the difference in them is just the ballistic skill, which I really don't know why they decided to do it like that. I suspect they want to maybe in the future come back to the points that you would pay for the war gear, and then it would make sense, but otherwise they're just having an extra gun here, which essentially is just a lot more shots, which would be better to just roll them all at once, and you cannot because of the difference in ballistic skill now. They also get very good 2 rules on their guns, which will rarely come up, especially the heavy rule. Melta 2 will sometimes happen, but they only get 18 inches of range on their guns, which is their biggest problem in my opinion, and getting within 9 of your tank or monster target is sometimes problematic. Heavy is even worse because you really want to move those guys. They only have 5 inches of movement and 18 inches of range, and sometimes you just need to move a little bit to get into range and line of sight. So threat range is their biggest issue, delivery of that damage. That's why their most reliable way of actually using them is reserving them, but then beware that your opponent may exploit that and try to hide behind ruins or put some squads along the side of the board, depending on the deployment you have, and then prevent you from setting up even within line of sight of whatever you want to shoot. Obviously, that's going to take quite a lot of pre-measuring from them and time if you're playing with the clock, but still beware that your squad may be out of position if your opponent knows what they're doing. And as you've already guessed, you're not going to get into 9 inches because you're setting up 9 inches away, more than 9 inches away when you're coming from reserves, and it means that you will be just on that line of being almost within melt range, but not really. And another good thing about them, apart from them being quite durable with 3 wounds each, T6 and 3+ save, is that they are also quite cheap. The 1 unit costs 95, and 1 unit of 3 and 1 unit of 6 is 190 points. So sub 200 points for a full 6-man Gravis squad with Meltas is a good price. That's why I think there is a place for them in Space Marine lists. They're not an auto-include, but they are quite efficient at what they do, if you know how to use them. Stormlands detachment also is quite nice for them, because there you can actually advance them automatically 6 inches if you have a CP, and if you have a CP you can give them assault keyword, and then you can circumvent their problem of range by just using them as a good shooting infantry unit that can go through ruins and pick out your enemy's monsters and vehicles that have popped out of the cover or maybe set up on the objective. So use them as that beta strike unit. Next, the Ballistus Dreadnoughts, second place. This is essentially an old box dread with the missile launcher and last cannon, but the one who ate some weird candy and he became much bigger after the summer vacation. Toughness 12, 2+ save and 12 wounds just as the Redemptor, but no -1 damage unfortunately, because that would be probably too much, especially considering his price. Compensating that is his actual high strength shots that he gets and rerolls to hit against non-below half strength targets, which is an inverse of the useless ability that the Repulsor Executioner gets, which only can reroll hits against targets that are almost dead. He gets 4 good shots, 2 at strength 12, AP3 damage, D6+1, which are essentially just last cannon shots without twin linked ability, and 2 shots at strength 10, AP2 damage, D6. So very swingy on the damage, and that's why this guy is good, but only excellent in the spearhead detachment. And you will do roughly without the extra rerolls 5 damage to a tank, to a T12 2+ save tank, when you have Oath on that tank or using your own ability. That's not that impressive. However, he costs 140 points for so many high toughness 2+ save wounds with quite reliable shooting. I would say that's a very good deal. You don't take him to take tanks out on his own. You take him with 2 of his pals to bloat out your army with a lot of high toughness wounds that are also quite good in shooting. As anything, he can be killed, but your opponent will have to sacrifice a lot of shooting to get there, especially in cover with proper positioning from you, and you will be then able to retaliate heavily. He would definitely be on the first place if we're talking Ironstorm Spearhead, but for all other detachment, I think he is a very strong second place. All the buffs you get in the Ironstorm Spearhead definitely transform him into a very lethal machine. With the movement that you get, you can fall back and shoot and charge. With the enhancements, you get the lethal hits, which are not that important here, but still good. And obviously the one reroll to wound or damage, which is very important for that D6 or D6+1 on the last cannon. Now, first place, the one and only Gladiator Lancer, the most versatile of all of our candidates in terms of pure anti-tank firepower. He doesn't need a detachment to work properly. That's what I love about him. He is T10, 3+ save, 12 wounds and 10-inch move. So the durability on him is lower than on the Brutalis or the Ballistus, but he compensates that with a much more impressive profile. He gets 2 shots, but those shots are worth it, believe me. They're strength 14, AP4 damage, D6+3 with heavy rule, which in his case can actually sometimes be used, though not often, and 72-inch range, so he will be able to reach any target that he can see, even on the very other side of the board. And most importantly, he gets 1 reroll to hit, wound, and damage for his main gun's 2 shots. All this translates to around 10 damage to the tank target we discussed today, which is quite impressive, especially compared to the Ballistus, which is almost twice what the Ballistus would do. And I love the fact that you can put him into any detachment, be it Gladius, Vanguard, Stormlands, Anvil, any one of those which are not Ironstorm, and he still will function perfectly as an anti-tank platform, and I really love that about him. So if you're playing Righteous Crusaders, for example, the Black Templars, or Deathwatch detachment, consider taking Lancer, because he's not gonna be a disappointment. Again, 160 points, which is 20 points more than the Ballistus, I think are worth it for the increased output on the anti-tank firepower. Let me know if I missed a unit in the Codex Space Marines which would be better for that top 5. I might have, and I hope this video was useful for you, and I'll see you next time.